This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com. This show is brought to you by IndyWrestling.us. Check out IWC, RWA, and more. And listeners like you, support this show at patreon.com/Wrestling Mayhem Show.
Hungry as fuck, but I ain't starving yet. Paying for the pain, cocktail dollar set. Never said I was a gangster or thug, but I'm an animal. Beating for the taste of the blood.
Hey guys, it is the Indy Mayhem Show, the show where we talk with people in and around independent professional wrestling. I'm Mike Sorg at Sorgatron on Twitter here in our studio in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at Sorgatron Media, of course, as usual. And of course, before we get into our big game guest today, I want to remind everybody, please go check out WrestlingMayhemShow.com and IndyWrestling.us to support and catch other things, other people we've talked to. Wrestling Mayhem Show is a great podcast network where we have a lot of great professional wrestling podcasts, and I have a lot of fun with the communities over there on Facebook. And at the IndyWrestling.us, of course, you can find all the back episodes of the Indy Mayhem Show, talking with a lot of people, including a lot of people that you see on television today that I may have interviewed after their first match in my own basement several years ago. You never know who we've had. We've been doing this for a long, long time. I forgot that I stopped numbering it, so I don't even know how long it's been. So you can check out that. And, of course, check out wrestling action over there at IndyWrestling.us, IndyWrestling.network. A lot of people we do talk with on the show are featured among a lot of the great promotions that we do work with today. And I don't believe we've come across today's guest amongst our productions, other than most recently I had the opportunity to be behind the scenes at the Polycult Party 2. And this is where I met today's gentleman. You may have seen him on that little mini doc that we put out on social media, or just recently should have dropped, was the wrestling with coronavirus series that we've been doing on social media. Big Game Leroy is on the line with us from New York City, correct?
Yes, from Brooklyn, New York.
Yes. Fantastic. The Pittsburgh, New York connection, which seems to happen all the time here. You know, I love New York. I love Brooklyn. Stayed there a little bit, and usually around wrestling reasons. So,
I mean, I think MB has the best one. He says he's Pittsburgh born, New York paid, or something like that. I think that was
great.
A cool one.
That's great. I love it. I love it. Glad to see him representing here. And seeing some really big, cool stuff going on there. So before we get into stuff, you know, we kind of had a little bit of soft introduction there, but I like to kind of break the ice because, you know, like me, I have only recently discovered you thanks to the Polycult Party and you know, the Polyam Cult and everything, and the great work that MV Young's doing to get other names to other regions like we had with that. But I like to ask the question for people that don't know you. You know, first of all, like, what was your earliest kind of memory, earliest thing with professional wrestling that kind of got you hooked?
Oh, I think I've said this a few times, but like my earliest memory, I guess I'm maybe on the younger side to some people, whatever, was The Rock cutting a promo. And I think I was probably like maybe 3 or 4. And I just remember being hooked. Like, I don't remember what he was saying, but he was doing it in his very Rock way. And it was just entertaining, and it sucked me in. And it was like, it wasn't any wrestling in the ring. It was just him on the microphone entertaining the fans. And I really can't remember exactly what he was saying or what he was doing, but I just remember seeing the people going nuts and hanging on everything he said. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I think that's the earliest memory I got.
That's awesome. I saw an interview that you were really hooked on early UPN SmackDown.
Yes, that is also very true. Once I started actually remembering wrestling, and I started like remembering things as a child, as a post zygote, I was like, oh, okay, UPN SmackDown. Like, this is it. This is awesome. Eddie, Ray, Edge, Kurt Angle, early Lesnar, even. Like, I was like, this is rad. This is awesome.
And that would have been right in the middle of the brand split and everything, where it was a hot era, like introduction of Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas around that time, right?
Oh, yeah, world's greatest tag team.
Yeah, a lot of new faces mixing in. It was man, that was probably the best of the 2000s right there.
No, definitely. I mean, I thought SmackDown was the better brand, and I wasn't just biased. I don't think I'm just biased. I think a lot of people share that sentiment as well. You know, like, I look back on it, and I didn't have cable as a kid. I only had UPN. So I was super biased. But then I would go to my cousin's house or my uncle's house, and I'd watch Raw, and I'd just be like, okay, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, but what else is there? And like
Yeah.
then everybody else is like killing it on SmackDown, like the tag division, the cruiserweights, especially the cruiserweights. Like the SmackDown cruiserweights were like slept on. Like, oh man.
No, yeah, it was a big thing back then. So connected, because we're going to talk a little bit about the video game thing as well. What was your
Yes.
earliest memory of video games that got you hooked?
Oh, easy. I think my fourth Christmas, I got Pokemon Yellow on the Game Boy Color, and that was my first Pokemon game.
Hmm.
And I'm really glad that one was my first one because some people are like, "Oh, I started with Red or Blue," and and I'm like, "No, I started with Yellow, which meant I could have all three starters. I had Pikachu following me around everywhere. I
Hmm.
could check his mood and stuff." And I was a pretty bad trainer as a 4-year-old, so I could barely read. And he would always be angry and grumpy whenever I checked on his mood, and that was something that stuck with me and traumatized me for quite some time. Every single time I look at Pikachu, he's grumpy, and I'm just like, "What am I doing wrong? Come on!" I'm like fighting all these Pokemon and stuff, and I'm taking you to the Pokemon Center. We're leveling up. Why are you still angry?
Oh man, it was practice for having a pet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, who needs Tamagotchi? You have a Pikachu grouching at you all day.
Mm. So talk to me a little bit about obviously you're hooked on that early, the SmackDown kind of thing. Was it something that early on you said I want to get in the ring and do this, or was that something that kind of developed later on as you grew up?
It's people are always surprised because I feel like the cliche wrestling thing is, oh man, the moment I saw it, man, I was hooked and I knew I had to do it. And it's like I grew up a pretty scrawny kid, if that's
Hmm.
not a surprise to people, and I was a nerdy kid as well, and I didn't really believe wrestling was something I could legitimately do because your whole life you're kind of taught that you have to be a freak of nature, 6'5" and 250 pounds of muscle, and even as a kid in my wildest dreams, I could never see myself growing up and like being that. So I was kind of like, wrestling probably isn't for me. And I'm just gonna watch it and just love it and stuff. And it wasn't until I was like a teenager, like an early teenager, that I started thinking to myself, maybe I could do it. And maybe I should at least try. And like if I suck at it or whatever, at least I could tell people I tried
Hmm.
versus like never trying it and then just having regret for the rest of my life. And the times changed as well. Independent wrestling became a bigger thing. Guys like Daniel Bryan and CM Punk at the time were starting to become like top guys. Because like in wrestling, I was like, oh, smaller guys can be on the roster and get signed and do good, but like it wasn't like, oh, they can be viewed as a top guy. And when I saw Punk and Bryan, I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's our time to shine. Maybe smaller guys can make it and not just make it on the roster, but like be the top billing draws of the industry or whatever. And I was like, okay, let me really try. Let me really like, train, and then if I suck, whatever. But I need to like do this before like I'm too old or whatever.
So was it you were a geeky guy, but did you have any? Did you try out for sports? Do you have any kind of athletic kind of like just kind of get? He's laughing at me. He's like, no, I was playing. I was just trying to train that Pikachu through my teenage years, right?
I mean, I played a little bit of Wii Fit and Wii
There you
Sports.
go. Hey, that counts.
I was it's not that I'm not like like I wasn't athletic as a kid. Like I liked running a lot, and like
Hmm.
I think in high school I was like doing a little bit of like like a track club or whatever. Like we'd run the Williamsburg Bridge a few times or whatever, and I was always a big runner. I liked that a lot. When I was younger, I played like baseball and kickball in my gym class, and I wasn't bad at it. So it wasn't like I was unathletic. I just wasn't interested enough to get really good at these sports. The only thing that ever hooked me was wrestling.
Hmm.
And like, to your friends, that's like the least sportsy sports thing there is. So, I couldn't fit in. But definitely like wrestling was always in my head. And I was like, okay, if I'm gonna be a wrestler, I need to try to get in the best shape ever. And it was really funny because there's this thing called Spartan Race. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
It's one of those really difficult like marine runs or something, right?
Yeah, so you like run
Yeah.
through a mountain, you have to like climb rope, and it's almost like an army. Like you have to like jump, you have to crawl through
Hmm.
mud, you have to go through the trenches, you have to, do a whole climb, you have to do a bunch of burpees, you have to go uphill with this giant 35-pound sandbag. It
And
wasn't fun. And
And this is one of those, like, I know, like, a lot of them are courses designed by Marines that to
yes,
simulate their training, basically, right? Like, there was a there
essentially.
yeah, we've done interviews with them in the past, not on this show. But
So literally 2 months before I started training to be a pro wrestler,
Hmm.
at the age of 17, my friends, they had done Spartan Race. Like I was friends with these two super athletic dudes who for whatever reason were friends with a nerdy kid. And they were like, "Hey, like you should tag along." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna try to be a wrestler, so I should probably like get good at this athletic stuff." And I probably should have trained for that. I probably should have like worked out for that and gotten ready for that, but just kind of wung it. I just kind of winged it and stuff. And then it was like I finished it. My time wasn't amazing or anything special, but I
That's
finished it. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm ready for this. If I could finish the Spartan race and I didn't give up and I just pushed through it. It was like a mental toughness kind of thing rather than like a physical toughness thing, then at least I did my thing. Cause like I couldn't even lift a 35-pound bag. Like my friend, he ended up having to lift it for me for a good chunk of it. And then I had to always do burpees because I couldn't like lift up my own body weight and stuff like that. Like I swear I was probably like 100, maybe 40 pounds back then. And like it was a sad thing, but I wasn't giving up. I was still running up that hill. I did that little jump over the fire pit at the end, and that was pretty cool. And like I look back on that and I'm like, oh, that's what I did to prepare myself to be a wrestler or to start training to be a wrestler, I should say.
so you're feeling pretty good. You accomplished this big physical task. And then you get into, and we've all heard the stories about the starts of wrestling training. So did that actually prepare you, or was it still a wake up call?
I'm not sure if I don't know. Like I probably didn't have to do it
Right,
because
right.
yeah, because I do think mentally it pushed me in that place of like, okay, physically demanding thing.
Hmm.
How do I push through it and keep doing physically demanding thing, even though it hurts, even though it's difficult, even though it meant like it's a hurdle, because a lot of people that's the difficult thing. Because in wrestling, we have to reteach our body like, oh, these things hurt. Oh, we're still gonna go anyways and keep on going and
Yeah.
keep on fighting and keep on wrestling, and that's tough because your body usually goes, no, that's dumb, that hurts, we're gonna stop and like die or whatever. So like you have to train yourself for that, and I think it helped mentally like a lot like for that, and it helped me with the mental confidence that okay, anything physical or anything physically grueling I can push through. And like I have limits and I'm human, of course. Like I'm not gonna be able to like lift the 300-pound guy no matter how much I mentally tell myself I can. But at least I know whatever pain I go through, I know I can tolerate it and push through it and endure it and, you know, do the things I need to do in the ring. And I think that was really cool for me to like learn for myself because I didn't always have that confidence.
That's great. So what school did you go to? How did you discover it?
I went to the House of Glory wrestling school, and it was funny because me and a friend of mine actually started training there together. And I was actually going to go to Johnny Rod's, and he discovered, oh no, this school was way closer, and it's trained by the Amazing Red. And once he said Amazing Red, I was like, oh, I
Hmm.
watched that guy on TV, and I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm going to train over there. Like, I mean, Johnny Rod's Hall of Famer, but the Amazing Red's the guy who I grew up kind of watching and stuff, and I saw on TNA and stuff. So I'm gonna jump there, and I'm not afraid to admit that was a whole fanboy thing. But I was like, I'm going there, like and also he's still wrestling and stuff, and I feel like there's more for him to teach me because he's still doing it and doing it at a high level and stuff like that.
And he's a guy, more recently in several years ago, he was doing a great series here in the Pittsburgh area with Renegade Wrestling Alliance against Sanjay Dutt. So like he's definitely more fresh in my mind because of that. And it was a great experience filming those matches too.
Yeah, yeah, no, he's definitely like someone like, and he's an all time great, of our generation. I mean, a lot of people emulate his style. A lot of people we see on TV at the highest levels give
Mhm.
him so much respect because he innovated so much of that style that we see now. That indie high flying cruiserweight style that is prevalent in the later 2000s and 2010s, like that's all him really, And I
Mhm.
mean, like that, I think that's super cool and super cool to know that I learned directly from that and stuff like that.
Excellent. So how did you develop through that into you weren't big game Leroy to begin with. What did you develop into in your kind of first stints out of school there?
Uh so when I first started wrestling at the shows there, I wasn't really wrestling at first.
Hmm.
I was a part of Cash Flow Ken Broadway's faction, Cash Flow, and we were a bunch of jerks. He was flaunting his money and he would use it to get his advantage over his opponents. He would use me as like this paid off ref, and I would help him win matches and stuff like that. I was a real jerk. And I'm like his young boy, which in wrestling it means like essentially you're their servant, and you're like their indentured servant, and you carry their bags, you serve them water and all that stuff. And that's what I was doing for the I guess first 2 years of my career, which was really cool because like I mean some people like they train for years and years and they don't get to see like a show or a crowd up
Mm.
until they debut as a full-on wrestler.
Yeah.
For me, I kind of got to learn and I kind of got to like be a part of shows, and maybe not even a wrestling capacity, but I got to like feel the environment, feel the crowd, and kind of feel what it means to be ringside to big matches and stuff like that. So when I did get to debut and I finally got to be myself and I finally got to wrestle, it wasn't completely nerve wracking. It wasn't completely overwhelming. It was a lot more something I was more comfortable with because I had been out in front of a crowd for 2.5 years, you know?
So it's a little bit of like you got part of it out of the way. Now I can just concentrate on having a good match.
Exactly. And like, part of it too was like, I just learned a lot of stuff about like how to feed off the crowd or how to go against them and stuff like that that a lot of people like, you usually figure out as you're wrestling and as you're going about it and stuff like that. Like it was fun, and I look back on it and I'm like, oh, that was a really perfect way to kind of break into the business. Part of it was because I had this cool story of like this guy is like a jerk to me and I'm his servant and stuff like that. And now after a while, people are kind of like, oh, we want to see this little kid, this kid in wrestling, beat up that rich guy or whatever and show him what's what. And eventually I did, and the fans really got behind me in a way. And I think like that stuff that's a blessing, like
Hmm. House of Glory is definitely one of the more influential independents. It seems, of course, with the trainees attached to it and everything like that. Did that gain any opportunities for interesting, people coming in that those first couple of years that you may have not had an opportunity otherwise?
I think like the opportunities came in the way of like meeting a lot of like big names at such a
Mm.
like young level. Because I think about other people who don't get an opportunity to share locker rooms with guys like Rey Mysterio and the Hardys and RVD, Rhino. There's just so many. Zack Sabre Jr., Leo Rush.
Wow.
So many people I got to kind of pick their brains of and learn from. And maybe in the moment, it's like they give you one or two sentences of advice, but then later on, you're like, oh, that's what they meant by that. And I look back on that and I'm just like super fortunate that I was like able to train in that environment and be a part of shows that drew in superstars of that caliber, because then I got to learn from some of the best and I got to like really like learn. I mean, within my first year in wrestling, I got to do a Samoa Joe seminar because Samoa Joe, it was right after he left TNA and right before he signed with NXT. And he did a seminar and I got to learn from him. And like to this day, I mean, hopefully I can meet him in person. He helped clean up a lot of my strikes. And, it's hilarious because obviously when you think of Samoa Joe, you think of strikes. And he helped me with a lot of that. And like, I'm hoping to see him one of these days and then let him know, hey man, you really helped me out in that little seminar. You probably don't remember me, but you really helped me out in that seminar.
Those little tip. It's always the little things, isn't it? And those things I see. I don't know how many times I hear like somebody have a Paul London seminar, and so I was like, I'm going to learn how to do a moonsault, and that's not what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Paul London's the one teaching that person the moon. They probably could have always done the moonsault, probably. They just
Right.
needed to hear Paul London say, "You got this," and then that just made it happen.
You got this, man. You got this, man. Paul London is one of the coolest, chillest dudes I've met. So.
So I've heard. I think I met him once in passing. I
Mm.
think it was like a Five Borough show, like a million years ago.
Yeah, he's all over the place. So, move from that. So, of course, the thing that got my attention, you're taking on another friend of the show, PB Smooth, at that Paulie
Yes.
called, and I know nothing but talking with you beforehand, a little bit, and you come out and you got this Nintendo Switch. And I'm like, I'm a gamer myself. I don't have a Switch yet. But man, it's
Oh,
on the list. I got like everything
it better
else.
be. I was gonna say that kind of hurt me a little bit. I
Oh,
was
it's
like,
one of those
oh.
like, man, that's gonna be an investment in. I want to buy the Mario games, and those don't. Man, I'm a discount gamer, man. I got the Game Pass. I buy games for $10, and I'm having fun with it. But
That's fine.
that's the way I
I
roll.
can respect that.
I'm a gamer on a budget, But I see you come out with that, and I'm just like, he's actually gonna wrestle with this thing. He's like, wait, that's crazy. That's got to be a broken one, right? and first of all, because we talked a little bit on Twitter about this, and I saw like this is a functioning. This is your Switch. This isn't just like
Yes.
my busted out old one that I'm bringing into a wrestling match. You're playing
No,
that on
it's
the
the
way
real
to show.
deal.
So,
Like I could flip my phone camera and you would see Super Mario Galaxy on my Switch, which is the same Switch I wrestled with in Pittsburgh about a month ago. Like it's the Switch I use at home. I don't have any dummy Switch, no prop Switch. It is my Switch, and I usually
jeez.
take time to make sure I show the fans and I show the people around what I'm playing and that it's the real deal. And then there's so much fun in that because then people go from like, oh, that's cute, and then they go, oh, wait, that's the real $300 system, and
So now there's this extra level of danger added to your match. If anybody has a Switch, knows how much it costs, has ever dropped a phone and broken the screen and had to deal with that, there's like, oh, this crazy guy's taking it in the ring and he's playing it. What is happening right now?
I mean, it's crazy to me because people get like anything bad can happen in the wrestling ring, period. Like injuries, whatever, freak accidents, all sorts of stuff. And then you just double it with a video game as well. So it's like not just me risking my health. It's like, no, it is also my game console's health.
Yeah. Look, I'm nervous with my cameras at ringside. I'm not in there. So.
But I mean that's just who I am. It's really funny like how it got started because like it started as like a road trip joke. Like I had a match in Dojo Wars, CZW Dojo Wars, about 2 years ago, I want to say, and I was wrestling a girl for the first time, and she's supposed to be like this really nasty girl, a bad girl, and all this stuff, and like I'm a super happy go lucky kid, and I was always kind of big on video games and stuff, and that was kind of like reflective of what I was trying to put out there, and I thought to myself, how do I wrestle this girl who's smaller than me and all this stuff, and how do we make this make sense? And I was like, this is my first time there. I want to make a good impression. I want to be remembered. The usual wrestling stuff that we all struggle with on the independents.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, well, it'd be really funny if like this, because I'm playing my Switch on the road up there, and I'm like, would it be really funny if I just like didn't put it down and I just kept like wrestling her with it or whatever? and then I'm like, and then my friends are like, oh, it's not a bad idea, and I was like, I'm gonna do it. And then it's funny to me because people think, oh, you probably just planned that out. And I was like, no, like I just literally thought in that car ride, that 2-hour car ride, like, I could probably do a drop kick with my Switch in my hands and not worry too much about it. I could probably do a senton on her without too much worry about it. And I was like, well, I got some offense. Let's do it. And that's what I did. I think I did like a kick combination, a drop kick, and then a senton on her. And the crowd of 20 people reacted and they ate it up. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe I don't even need to wrestle. I could do this. And then once I started playing around with it, I started working on it, and I wrestled at this place called PPW a few months later. I think I want to say like 4 or 5 months later, and it was like a battle royal, and I decided, hey, it's a battle royal. Why not I just play with my Switch and stuff? And I did a drop kick. I landed on my back. I sat up, and the crowd reacted, and they reacted in such a way that I was like, oh, maybe there's actual money to this, and this isn't like just an act. This is something that I could really build myself around, and it can be something that people really want to see, and it can build attraction because like sure, we've seen a video game guy in wrestling before and stuff like that, and I always admit that the video game guy in wrestling is not an original thing. I'm probably the 7th or 8th video game wrestling guy at this point.
I think we're trying to set up a match between you and our local video game guy, Brohemoth, actually. So
yeah, I heard, and then I was like, damn, another one, and I feel bad. Like I don't ever go defensive. I just feel bad because I'm like, oh man, like we're sucking up each other's energy and all that stuff because it's tough. It's tough out here, and like I think the video game wrestling thing is just I think it's so cool because most wrestling fans are video game fans, and I have this belief that nerd culture and these subcultures they form together perfectly because like people who are wrestling fans love video games, and people who love video games usually enjoy wrestling as well. And I'm like, you just mash up those two audiences, and you have a much larger audience now.
Absolutely. And even with that, like it's not like we all we know Beastman, right? And it was like, well, it's not like he's the first caveman in wrestling, right? It's been happening for years, but now like he's like the maybe the best caveman in wrestling right now.
Yeah.
Like it's generational. You're different than a Brohemoth because he does this like he's like the Bowser guy,
Yeah.
pretty
I mean, I
much.
can't be Bowser. I wish. I wish I
Right,
was that big.
right. He's like more a video game character. I mean, we've seen in Chikara with the Smash Brothers and stuff like this. But but there's still Big Game Leroy is his own thing.
Yes,
So
and I was constantly looking for that because I had definitely been a part of like a lot of locker rooms and stuff where people just go, "Oh, you're like trying to be like Xavier Woods, right?" And I'm just like,
oh,
"Come on, man." I'm just like, I'm trying to do my own thing. I'm trying to like do good and
but to be fair, I mean he's popularized it, so that's gonna be
no,
the go-to
definitely,
for
and
people,
that's
right?
awesome. And like
Yeah.
Xavier Woods, like that's the dude. That's a homie. Like I love that dude. Like he's awesome,
Hmm.
and his channel's super hilarious. What he does with the New Day has been super entertaining for years, and like there's no hate in that. I just think that in wrestling, it's tough to like stand out on your own, and then the minute someone compares you to somebody else, it's like, well, I just be me? Like I just want to be me.
Well, to that, I actually had an opportunity in the last week to check out the Wrestlers Take Manhattan special on IWTV, and,
Yes,
and I didn't know because I think I saw a little GIF of this, and I didn't know this was the thing. You took on MV Young, I believe it was for the Ring Light Championship,
yes, it was.
and this I think debuted just days after the Polycall party too. And
Yes,
it was in the style of a Street Fighter game,
yes.
which was fantastic.
No, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun to take MV to my game, quote
Hmm.
unquote, and to like show him a little bit of how we fight in these games, you know. And I think like in all seriousness, I think that that was something I wanted to do with cinematic wrestling for so long,
Hmm.
and I was just waiting for the means to do so and for like the right time because I think maybe a year ago somebody would have been like, "Oh, cinematic wrestling, that's whack," or that's super corny or something, and like now it's like there was so much buzz around it. A lot of people seemed really entertained and a lot of people really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as like just watching it back, and I was like, "Oh, this is really, really cool." Like it's a nice mix of some intense action, but then there's some laughs, and then there's something in there if you're a video game fan or wrestling fan, and if you're both, like it's probably really fun.
Hmm. There's something about this, and I'll have to ask you about this too, because I've seen a few of these, seen a couple of the MV things, and obviously these are all shoot around, probably the Brooklyn neighborhood, or New York City in general. Um, there just seems, is it just the city just lends to the randomness of the places? Because I'm watching this thing, and I'm like, these guys are fighting on top of a taxi. Did they
Yeah.
acquire the taxi or did they happen across a taxi and it's New York, so nobody gives a crap? What you do with it?
Yeah, no, it's definitely the New York thing. We just happened to come across a taxi while we were brawling around, and it's like, why not kill each other on a taxi? That makes the most sense. And it's called Wrestlers Take Manhattan for a reason. So let's show people the city and what we're all about.
There's an ad on it for one of the Star Wars movies, and I'm like, what is happening right now? And I think you see the taxi might have had like an airbag deployed or something, but it's like, where are they that they just like found this?
I mean, we were fighting for that ring light title. I didn't even know where I was for a little bit. I was just trying to get a ring light. Helps light up the games. Really good lighting for that.
Absolutely, you just gotta, yeah, they'll help your Twitch channel, right? So
Absolutely, exactly. See, you get it. You already get
there you
it.
go. There you go. I hey, know a couple of things about production. So another surprise, the realizing that I've definitely seen you before just a few weeks ago at the Polycult. Um you actually had an opportunity to be with AEW on the AEW Dark. I mean, it's fantastic seeing the different faces in there, faces we know from the Indies, or
Yes.
or here in Pittsburgh. Our boy Elijah Dean was just on there from the area that we just did some work with, and it's really cool to see that. Can you tell me how that came about and what that experience was like? Of course, this is in the middle of all
Of a
this craziness going on.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to me because like I'm pretty I have some friends over there at an AEW and stuff, and at the same time like uh right before everything shut down in New York, they were actually AEW supposed to come to New York.
Hmm.
And I had already reached out to them and I had said, hey, I'm a local guy and, please, whatever. I inquired at the way most of us indie guys inquire when they're in town
Yeah.
and in our town. They were supposed to be in New York for 2 days. I think it was Rochester and then the Prudential Center in Jersey. So they was going to be in the area for those 2 straight weeks. And I applied for both and stuff. And, obviously the pandemic literally happened right before they came into New York. And, that was a bummer. So when I found out that you kind of like they were looking for bodies and guys, and I had heard that from my friends, I put in the word. I said, "Hey, can you guys like throw my name in there?" My friend's private party, and I'm really, really, really close to those guys, like some of my best friends in the world, and they put in the word, and they were AEW was like, "Yeah, let's do it," and then I'm catching a flight in the middle of a pandemic to Florida. And like it didn't like it's crazy to me that and I feel almost guilty. It's like that only happens because of those state of the world, because
Yeah.
a lot of their talent is stuck where they're stuck and they're just like, well, we need guys, we need bodies.
Yeah.
And not to diminish from my own accomplishment, because like that was like a goal for like a obviously like that's an end goal for a lot of people. Like that was a big goal for me. And to me it's like, wow, like that's almost like super lucky, and but at the same time I got to make the most of this and stuff. And like it was a really awesome experience. Everybody in the locker room, it was the most positive locker room I've ever been in, and obviously the most like the highest locker room I've probably ever been in.
Hmm.
And it to me it's just like you would expect there to be more pressure and more walking on eggshells, and it was like no, everybody was super great. And it helps that I knew a lot of people from the indies there. I've known Alex Reynolds and John Silver. I've shared locker rooms with them. I had met Best Friends and Orange Cassidy before. Sonny Kiss is another person who used to be on the indies with us and was awesome in the New York scene. And it was just really great. Like it was a lot of fun, and everybody was so nice, so helpful. The feedback was really, really cool. My opponents were guys who I'd watched wrestle in the Bronx for years, and I've trained with them even before Santana Ortiz. And they didn't go easy on us, but it was still great. It was still great to be in the ring with them, guys who I know like who are just top notch, like one of the best tag teams in the world, really.
That's great. And this would have been after they came to the daily place, correct? Like you weren't in the warehouse or something like that.
No, no, no. This was the Jaguars. Yeah, this is Daly's place.
So
I almost like was like, it's not really a stadium. It's like there,
yeah, yeah,
connected and all that.
yeah.
But yeah,
That's crazy. Were there concerns with that? Like, obviously, we've heard a bit about the protocols and everything. If you watch Being the Elite, they talk about that, and I've watched Tony Khan interviews where he's talked about everything they do there.
yes.
And then we've talked about like how serious this was and how you realized in that interview we did before on the social media. But how did they waylay your fears going into something like this?
Well, I gotta say this. Like, it would have been an amazing opportunity. But honestly, if there was no COVID test, if there was none of that, I wouldn't have went.
Hmm.
Like, if I didn't know that before I like hopped on the plane and all that stuff, I
Yeah,
would have like not went. So to me, it was like, okay, well, one at the time, especially in New York, like COVID tests were already very like limited and stuff like that. And
yeah.
I was like, okay, well, I get to kill two birds with one stone. I kind of get to get my COVID test,
Right, right.
and hopefully, I don't have it, and like I don't have to quarantine in Florida for 14 days,
Oh,
because that would have really sucked.
I think we should drive this home for people that aren't in your situation up there. Like New York City was probably at the peak
Yeah,
worst of the COVID in the first wave here in this was May,
yeah.
so when this came up.
Yeah, so as soon as I heard that there was a COVID test and I was made more comfortable because my friends obviously, they were getting COVID tests every week and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they from for TV and they were like, yeah, like that's the procedure, this is how they do it. Da da da. You still wear your mask, you still try to socially distance as much as you can. Even if everybody's safe, you just have to be careful.
Yeah.
And that made me feel comfortable and I was like, all right, I'll do this. I think this is a really good opportunity, obviously, as well, career changing opportunity and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and I did the test, and they really did a good job because I'm like, I'm very like brutally honest with myself. I'm like, I'm an extra. I'm just a Joe Schmo off the street to them, and that's okay. But the way they treated me did not make me feel that way because they made sure like our health and everything was first. They made sure to talk us through everything and communicate exactly what the procedures and the protocols were going to be like, how they would want us to react, like how they want us to like go about doing things post test, and like even after you're clear, they're still just like, no, still wear your mask as much as you can and still try to keep a social distance, all this stuff. And I think like, and back in May, I was kind of like, huh, okay, okay. And now it's like that's what we're all doing, or what we all have to or should be doing at least.
Hmm.
And I think that that's really cool because, to be very honest, like, they were making it up as they were going along because there was so much we didn't know about this virus back in May. So much that we didn't know, so much that we were unaware of. And they were just kind of going, well, we got to be as safe as we possibly can if we're going to throw a wrestling show in a pandemic, a weekly TV show, wrestling show. And I think they did everything in their power to keep things safe. And I think, they did a really good job. I obviously I'm a little biased because I was there and my experience was what it was, but it's like I really feel like they did a really good job of making me feel safe and making me feel like a part of the roster in a weird way because they took such good care of me in terms of the virus and then in terms of just like really taking care of me, like everybody in that locker room made me feel like a part of the roster. And I think like something like that is really, really cool.
Excellent. So it's so weird getting some of the coolest opportunities while everything is nuts between this and seeing polycult parties and things like that. So generally, you've been around for around 6 years in the business.
Yes.
Tell me, what's the best and worst thing about indie wrestling for you?
Uh, I think the worst thing and like is the indie wrestling, and it's funny because I'm gonna also say that's like the best thing about it, but the worst thing is the indie aspect of it because everything is so indie, everything is so like subject to change, happens on a dime, and it's like nothing is ever as planned out as you think it's gonna be. Like when I was a young teenager and I was watching guys like my indie guys because I got into indie wrestling a little late was like El Generico, Kevin Steen, the Bucks, Candice LeRae, Cedric Alexander, like guys like that. I was like watching them at PWG, and then they traveled to over there, and then over there, and then over there, and then over there, and I was like, oh, that's so badass. That's so cool. They're traveling all over the country. They're probably making so much money, selling so much merch, doing, and then you realize, oh, their flights aren't being paid for, and they're driving most of the time. Oh, that it costs money to drive all across the country. Oh, half the time they don't even know for sure if they're like on the show. Half the time they don't even know how much they're getting paid sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the nature of the industry as you learn when you start coming into it. And it's tough. And I'm not saying like I hope I'm not romanticizing it because these are things that should be better, obviously. But that's the nature of being like breaking into the industry at least. Like you have to pay your dues to an extent. You have to do the traveling. You have to break a few bucks before you can make a few bucks. And like that's the nature of things that I wish things were like a little bit better. Like I think that if you wrestle and you are like literally killing yourself in the ring, you should get paid for it every time. Even if it's like a lump sum, like a small whatever, you should be getting paid for it because someone is in there killing themselves for you,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And like I think like people should always be getting paid for that, no matter how long they've been wrestling or whatever, because I think it's a very serious thing. Because then it just diminishes wrestling to me. Because to me, it's like, oh, you as a promoter or you as whatever don't value that wrestler.
Right.
You don't value wrestling. And then to me, it's like, oh, but then you're gonna pay everybody else, or you're gonna pay like one guy a ton of, that's a whole other thing. So like that part annoys me a little bit because I'm like, oh, that's not really great. And then at the same time, the uncertainty of like knowing, okay, I'm taking this drive to Jersey or to PA or a 5 hour drive to Maine or whatever, but I don't know if I'm really gonna wrestle. Like I just said maybe, and like I'm going on a maybe and stuff like that. And I mean that's the nature of breaking into the industry, but those are things that I wish would get a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I have noticed that things have gotten a lot better in terms of that. Like at least I'm seeing it more so. I'm seeing a lot of companies try to be a little bit more direct at their
Yes.
communication with wrestlers. Because I'm just like, I'm like, be straight up with me. If you don't want to have me wrestle there, just tell me, and like I'll get over it, and I'll just like try again in 6 or 8 months after I've gotten more buzz or whatever, or blah 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 blah, doing whatever I need to do to improve or whatever. But you have to tell people that. You don't just go, well, you can hop in the car and come over, but probably don't have anything for you. But you can help set up the ring. And it's just like, that's part of paying dues. But at the same time, you got to be real with people and not just manipulate people.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is the indie part that I don't really like. But my favorite thing about indie wrestling is this indie part. The way you interact with fans, the way that like organic moments are created, because I don't feel like a big like even AEW, which is great, and I enjoy their product most of the time and stuff like that. And WWE, I enjoy their product sometimes as well. I'm not even gonna like whatever. But my favorite thing about indie wrestling is anything can happen. and these are the moments that are like really special because the fans got to be a part of it in such a way because they're right in front of you. Obviously, I'm speaking pre-pandemic, but they're like right next to you, right in front of the ring. Sometimes they're like right on top of the ring, and they're chanting, they're slamming their mats, they're doing everything, and they're clapping, the energy, they're chanting random craziness, probably because you stepped in gum or something, and that'll be a chant, or maybe like you messed up a move and that's a chant or whatever, or maybe you just look really dumb because you got a bad haircut and that's a chant. And that's the fun to it, because maybe in a WWE or an AEW or a TV wrestling company, that's not a thing, maybe it's not. But I think indie wrestling is so much fun for that. And like, to me, in indie wrestling, the crowd is like the most important thing, because that's when you really feel them. That's when they really feel a part of the show. That's when they really change things. Because to me, I'm like, oh, I can listen to them and I can feel them. And more than anything else, I can give them what they want or what I perceive them to want. And I think that that's really fun to me.
Excellent. So, first of all, tell people, where can they find you? Social media?
Well, Big Game Leroy, at Big Game Leroy on Twitter and Instagram. You can also add me on Facebook. I'm Leroy Green. You can also find my Pro Wrestling Tees store, by Big Game Leroy ProWrestlingTees.com/by Big Game Leroy.
And also give a shout out, because also inspiration for giving you a hit up about an interview is our good friend Dutters, my co-host for the Awesome Cast, who is doing her radiation fashion show.
Yes, I saw that. That was so awesome. That was really cool. That made my day. I really mean that. That made my day, because I've never had anybody like do my Indian playing games pose. Like, I think that was cool, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. The Switch and everything too. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Yes. Well, she when she started radiation at the beginning of the year, or was diagnosed at the beginning of the year, and completely just went all in as like, I need something to do. She's Nintendo Switch and Animal Crossing, like full on.
Yeah, no, Animal Crossing what got me through the early parts of quarantine when I was depressed and I needed stuff to do.
Yep.
And so happy for Animal Crossing.
It's good. She gives great Animal Crossing updates every week on our tech show, the Awesome Cast. So.
Oh, nice! I got to check that out. I definitely got to check that out.
Well, thank you. Hey, it was great meeting you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Big Game Leroy. Please, everybody, go check him out. If you don't know where to, the Polycall Party 2 is up on Twitch, YouTube, I believe, with Go Professional Wrestling, and of course, you got a lot of cool stuff out there. Just go follow the social media and get a lot of that stuff, and please support him over at Pro Wrestling Tees. You can support this podcast, one, by checking out the stuff over at IndyWrestling.us, and of course that also supports a lot of the talents and promotions that we work with. And also you can support this show directly at patreon.com/wrestling show, or Wrestling Mayhem Show, excuse me. Patreon.com/Wrestling Mayhem Show, where you'll get this, the rest of the podcast, plus we have a lot of behind the scenes interviews and moments and things that we do put in there for as little as $1 if you guys can contribute, and we appreciate everybody that already does do that. So thank you guys so much. Until next time, please support indie wrestling. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.